Welcome back to the Magic Sponge podcast, a miracle cure for all your rugby league injury issues. I'm Brien. I'm the guy behind NRL Physio, all the stuff you see on socials. My co-host, James, he is here. He's a big Bronx fan. Mate, big win this week, but also good to have the certainty from Kevy that you definitely will be playing finals. I mean, that's surely got to help you sleep at night.
It does. It's all but guaranteed us seeing September footy, Brian, and I cannot believe it when I say it, but it may actually come to fruition. Move past the fact we played terribly against Para and somehow got home there in one of the biggest bedshits of the season. But the Dragons actually dropped a game today. So the possibility is still there and it's still alive. But now that Kevy has guaranteed it, he's put it in pen, it's hard to look back and look at anything differently as an outcome there, Brian. So up the Bronx, we might be in September footy. Up Kevy Walters. Maybe Coach Whisperer has got in his ear here. Maybe Bradley Stubbs has just got in Kevy's ear. Maybe that's how we're going to play finals footy, mate. It's all about belief. It's all about manifesting it in.
Mate, it is my one aim in life to have Bradley Charles be a friend of the show. Get him on and just get around the boys on a Sunday night. Big Bradley Charles fan. So if anyone's got any connections to Bradley Charles, reach out. More than happy to get him on the show. But
I'd love to get him on the show, mate. I'd love to get him on.
How good. Pick his brain. But the one thing I want to talk about from today, so I ventured down to the Goldie to see the NRLW Titans have a big win against the Roosters. But, mate, I'm not sure if you saw, there was some brouhaha in that game, like big brouhaha. And it was right in front of where I was sitting. Couldn't be more about it. It was on
so
the young and old. The crowd were going mental. Send him off, send her off. Like it was real good stuff. And then it just kept going. It was like even after the full-time siren, they were still going at each other. Fantastic. Love it. And the big thing I love is that I think the NRLW, for what I've seen so far, like it kind of lacks that kind of, I guess, intensity sometimes, where it's like, God, I just want
visceral
you guys,
hatred, Brian.
Yeah, I want you guys to hate each other.
I love seeing people hate each other. There's nothing better. That's what
100%.
sport is built on. That's what footy is all about. That's why everything is bigger and better when people hate each other. I'm all for it. Like the girls were ripping and tearing today, Brian. I am jealous you got to see it in person. That would have been unbelievable scenes.
Yeah, mate. And that's the thing. I truly believe, as much as sportsmanship, yep, we're both big on, for sure. Make sure you're a good sport, especially when you lose and these kind of things. I know you're shaking your head at the moment, but yep, go for it. But yeah, like the passion and tribalism, it's built on hating each other a little bit. And it got me up and about and got the whole crowd up and about. So more of it, girls. Just keep it coming. But guys, look, you know all the things. We're on YouTube. You know why you're here. Injury analysis. If you get value out of the content, patreon.com/NRL Physio. I reckon we get straight into it tonight. So let's get into the injury wrap from round 25, brought to you by Payne Pod, drug-free pain relief anyone can use.
I don't know exactly what he's done. I would have thought it was an ankle, but I'm just guessing.
He shouldn't be out for a long period of time. I mean, I'm no doctor. We have to wait for the scans, obviously, but that'd be more positive than negative.
Spicy round of football in round 25, Brian. We're going to start with the HIAs as per usual. So out of this one, RTS was a HIA, Tyson Frizell, Kodi Nikorima, Jesse Bromwich, and Kobe Hetherington. I guess what this week sort of shows, Brian, is I've got no idea what the hell a sin bin means, and that's off the back of last week being I have no idea what a Cat 1 or Cat 2 concussion is categorised as these days. It's just a lot of confusion. I don't know what's happening, but I kind of like it. I kind of like the chaos.
Mate, it is rampant this week. So there's a lot of Cat 1s in there. I think RTS, Tyson Frizell were definitely Cat 1s. I think Kodi, Jesse, and Kobe were all Cat 2s, but, once again, very rare for them to challenge it. Yeah, look, like I just sit there and I've stopped. Like I used to get all involved in it, especially on Twitter, sort of getting around it, but it's just fruitless. Like it just gets you nowhere. It's literally expending energy talking about this stuff when it just doesn't get any better. It seriously doesn't. It just gets more frustrating. So I've resigned myself to just not talk about it because I can't expend energy on it anymore going back and forth on why this and why that, except here when we're on the pod on a Sunday night, I guess, but we won't go into it too much. I just think, like mitigating circumstances or mitigating factors are so important with these kind of things, especially if you're going to start coming down on high contact, which the NRL has done over the last couple of years in different ways. But I'm not sure what was really mitigating too much. I think like Roger dipped a little bit and he was hit from the side, so went a little bit sideways as well, but Crichton was still very upright. So I just, especially when I guess you then see some other ones that are, as people have said, are very, very similar, have either gone to bin and stuff like that. It's just, it's just very difficult to wrap your head around, as a fan for sure.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, mate. It's just a lot of confusing areas, but we'll move forward through the weekly game. So first game of the round was an absolute boil over there. Good on the Tigers for getting the game there. So out of this one, Adam Doueihi was ruled out pre-game with knee swelling. I think that's off the background of his multiple surgeries in there. And then Aidan Sezer in the press, who sounds like Benji says season over for him and maybe something more serious from a shoulder perspective. I haven't heard any updates on Aidan Sezer, Brien. Have you got anything?
Yeah, well, they said I didn't see any mechanism, so I went back to check, and he kind of seemed like he was dealing with it for the couple of minutes before he went off, but I couldn't find an obvious thing, whether I missed something in the first half potentially, because he went off not long after halftime. But I mean, look, they said it might be the end of his season. The Tigers have only got one more game in 2 weeks' time. So it's not a massive statement to be like, at this time of year, that might be like, Roger Tuivasa, Sheck's season's over, because they've only got one more game left. So, jury's out on that one. Maybe he dislocated it potentially and or subluxed it and might need a Rico, would probably be worst case scenario there. But there wasn't an obvious mechanism to go off. I think Adam Doueihi won with the knee swelling. The Tigers are pretty adamant that it is just like workload related and they've got to deload him. But I think for anybody like myself, and I know yourself, who are big Adam Doueihi fans, particularly from a SuperCoach fantasy standpoint, like we spoke a lot in the preseason about sort of moving forward the uncertainty around Doueihi with 3 ACL injuries in one knee, just trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, particularly around the cartilage and those kind of things, the ability of the knee to withstand week in, week out footy moving forward. We've seen it here. They're, as I said, they're adamant that it's not a fresh injury. He hasn't like gone out and twisted and felt a pop and torn his meniscus or something like that. But I guess it's just moving forward, like even into next year, even with a full off season, there's just there's definitely a risk moving forward that this could happen to Doueihi. Yeah, like ongoing. He could get to round 6 or 7 next year and his knee could swell up and he could need a week or two off to kind of let it settle down. So I think it's just worth people kind of realizing that this is something where when you have an ACL or 3 ACL injuries to the one knee, this is the kind of thing that can pop up from time to time. I'm sure, it's not something you like to hear either, hey?
No, it's certainly, it's not always the case, but it probably gives you a little bit of a pointer into cartilage health and how that responds to load and how it responds to playing load, training load, and all those sort of things. Again, to your point, Brian, about multiple surgeries, it's very common even after keyhole surgery. A lot of people think, oh, I've only had 3 scopes on my knee. They're minimally invasive. That shouldn't really lead to sort of advancing degeneration or advancing cartilaginous changes, but it's just not the case. Like when you see people that have multiple scopes, things can change very, very quickly from a knee health perspective. So one to keep an eye on there. It's going to be interesting to see where they line up Adam Doueihi next year. Looks like they've probably made a bit of a home for him in the centres that I could see there, unless they're thinking maybe in a utility sort of role. I'm not really too sure how the Tigers are going to line up. They've certainly got some options there in the halves moving forward. Luai's coming across. Lockie Galvin was outstanding this year, and Latu Fanu's made a pretty good fist of the few games as he's been in. So I don't know where they think Adam Doueihi is potentially going to play. That'll be one to watch. He may not be an injury by the year for me or you though, Brian. We sort of cursed him there last year, unfortunately, to Adam, friend of the show, but might be one to watch moving forward. Next game was Warriors v Bulldogs here. So boil over a little bit to, well, Bulldogs are favourites, but a bit sad to see Shaun Johnson go out on a losing note at home. Probably a few calls the Warriors missed in this one that were a little bit spicy, but injury-wise, Josh Curran was ruled out pre-game with a shoulder AC joint aggravation, I suppose. So that shouldn't cost him too much time, is what sounds like. Kurt Mann's being diagnosed as a fractured collarbone, and Adam Pompey was ruled out with a knee injury. I don't know much more about Adam Pompey's knee there, Brian. Do you want to start with him first, and we can cover off the other doggies?
Yeah, mate, I'll just pour one out for SJ. Got my SJ 200 shirt on, or 300? 200. Yep, 200 shirt on tonight. Just the great man. If I have teared up recently, it was that. Like there was, someone must have been sprinkling some pollen through the air in my lounge room when that one was going on because, really emotional. I think we've carried on about SJ. We will try not to go too far down that track again, but it was good to see him out there in front of the home crowd and nice little harker at post game, which was really good to see. Adam Pompey with the knee. Once again, mechanism wasn't super clear. I think it might have been an aggravation of that MCL injury that he just came back from. They seem to be checking that knee again. So, we've seen more and more MCL aggravations if it is one. So it's something, once again, I'm not stuck in my ways. Like I've starting to see quite a few MCL aggravations. So that's something I'll sit down and have a look at the stats this year and last year, sort of compare and contrast, and maybe that'll change the way I view MCLs in terms of their re-injury risk moving forward. Kurt Mann with a collarbone, fracture. He underwent surgery according to the Daily Telegraph. So it's a tricky surgery, I think, as you noted a week or two ago, just with the structures around the area. Having the brachial plexus in around there, having some pretty important arterial blood vessel stuff going on in around there as well. So it's a tricky surgery, and it's just not. I kind of put in my socials post. It's just not a bone fracture you can kind of accelerate. Like we're hearing about Reece Walsh, trying to come back from a hand fracture in 2-3 weeks, that kind of thing. Collarbone, you just can't do it because of where it is, the important structures around there, but also it just cops an absolute battering in a footy game. Like you can't hide it. It's where it's located. It takes a lot of force. So if it's not quite 100%, it's big trouble. So best case scenario, 6 weeks. I think good friend Gus has said 8 to 10 weeks, which is probably pretty standard if surgery is required. 6 weeks more if you don't need surgery. So more than likely season over. Maybe he's back for sort of the prelim / grand final if the doggies make it that far, but it'll be pretty unlikely. And then Josh Curran with the shoulder. Once again, Gus has said more than likely he'll be out until round 27. I think I discussed in the casualty ward on Patreon this week, my expectations after the team list came out was sort of seeing Max King on the bench. I was like, it would make so much sense for Max King to come in for Curran, just to kind of, with Max King back a week early, give Curran's shoulder a bit of a breather over a week to 2 weeks. It'll definitely help, but it won't be quite at 100% even by finals because it usually hangs around, particularly one that you've aggravated a couple of times, for about 3 to 4 weeks. But the longer he has away from aggravating it, the better it is. So, certainly if he can return by round 27, his performance should at least be a little bit better and his risk of aggravation should be a little bit lower. But I wouldn't be counting on him next week at this point in time, which I know is both yourself and myself, I think, mate.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I put him as well. Like the longer the better. The Bulldogs, it depends on how next week shakes out as to round 27, I think, because they're sitting at 5th at the moment. So they're 2 points out of the 4. But if they're mathematically not going to make the top 4 because their for and against is a little bit worse, and I guess the Roosters and Sharks directly above them, I just wonder if they rest him through to week 1 of the finals potentially, and just see if they need him for a must-win game. It's 5v8. They're going to get a better matchup out of there. Obviously the Broncos are going to be making it according to Kevy, so they might get us in week 1 of the finals. So that'll be bad news for them, obviously. But, that might be a more likely scenario there for Joshy Curran, I would dare say. On the Broncos, mate, we might as well move forward to the next game because that was Broncos v Eels. No injuries out of this one, but we probably need to talk Payne Haas and Reece Walsh updates. I guess, again, Brian, it probably doesn't really matter because Kevy's guaranteed finals for us. So whether these guys are on the park or not probably doesn't make a difference, but there may be some people out there who are interested. So for those interested, do you have any updates on these two players?
Yeah, I think Kevy, after or before guaranteeing finals, I can't remember whether it was before or after, kind of intimated that both Walsh and Payne Haas wouldn't be back this week coming. Probably most surprised about Walsh. I mean, Payne, Haas, Liz Frank, tough to kind of push once again to get back quickly. And as you say, because they've guaranteed finals, so they're a lock, then why wouldn't you just rest them all the way through to week 1? But look, I think Walsh, I'm surprised. Or this is once again Kevy speak. Like Kevy says a lot of stuff at a lot of times, and it's not all that accurate. So I think the jury's out. Like, as much as this is a cop-out, I'd just wait for Tuesday team list. I wouldn't read too much into what Kevy says there until we actually see it on Tuesday, or until the throng of journos who hang out at Broncos trainings tell us on Monday exactly what's going on. They tend to be pretty good at that.
Does that offend you as a Dolphins fan, given that the Broncos have the Dolphins on Saturday, Brien, that Kevy's going to rest here? Do you want to spark something in the media here against Kevy Walters?
Mate, all I'll say is that if our boy Tevita Pangai, who we'll talk about in a second, can overcome his 17th, 18th, 30th hamstring injury of his career and play, then Kevy better not rest, because the big man, he'll go out and take on, well, if Payne Haas isn't there, he'll have to take on maybe Paddy Carrigan, I guess. And obviously he's going to win that battle because he's Tevita Pangai Jr. So why not? But mate, I mean, look, I love the Finns, don't get me wrong, but it's also reality is, the way they've been playing the last 6 weeks. I think the Bronx are pretty safe. I think I'll be tipping the Bronx pretty safely. And on top of that, I've got a membership with my eldest daughter, Isabel, and I graciously suggested that my wife, so I usually go to the footy with Belle, but my wife, being a big Bronx fan, she's come from a Bronx family. She is going to take Isabel to the Bronx Dolphins on Saturday night. So nice girls' night. That'll be great. And I'll probably, I'll hopefully won't have to experience in person what's going to happen, which will be a positive as well.
Yeah. Is JMK any chance for you guys coming back this week?
Well, you'd think so, because I think it was around 18, 19, and it's sort of 6, 7, 8 weeks now post injury for him. So I kind of had it pegged around now. But mate, I don't know what. Wayne's a bit all over the shop. Like if Kevy's got his isms. Wayne. I think everyone's spoken about it, like the whole South thing and stuff. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it just seems it doesn't seem to be the clarity and the kind of direction that the Finns were going early in the season. It doesn't seem to be there at the moment. So I don't know. Like I probably the best way I put it, I think, and this applies to a lot of things, and I don't like to talk down our value to the punters all that much, James, but I think this time of year where I struggle to give the most value, because there's so much shenanigans. There's like teams resting. It goes outside.
So true. Yeah.
It just goes outside the regular, like, week in, week out, because at this time of year, you just don't know teams' mentalities. Like, you've got Souths, for example, who just any man, this dog, it's like shut down, like done for the year. Like, we're resting them, even if they could have played. It's just like, we're gonna let them go. Whereas other teams are playing guys who you're like, how are they still playing these players? Resting players that you didn't expect to rest. So I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we know that that's the case, that we're not going to be super accurate, because it's not just like your stock standard injury stuff anymore. There's a lot of things behind the scenes going on in terms of restings and playings and what's their attitudes like and all those kind of things. So just worth keeping in mind when we're talking about all of these injuries, I think.
Good shout, mate. So we were going to talk Raiders-Panthers in between the Finns there, but there's no injuries there to Raiders-Panthers, Brian. So we might as well stick hot on the Finns there, even though you got a touch up by the Storm the other night. But TPJ's on the list here. Hamstring rule out pre-game. Are we expecting TPJ back next week? Hopefully, I guess for you guys, it'll be a bit of a revenge tour game for Tevita. I'm pretty keen if he's halfway a chance to see him line up. That could get a bit spicy, I reckon.
It would be good. Like, I love it for the entertainment factor. I'd be surprised. Like, this is his second hamstring. Like, when he signed for the Finns and came from Q Cup, he didn't debut. I think it was the first or the second week that he was signed because he had a hamstring issue. So another hamstring issue. He's got an extensive history. I mean, maybe it's just tightness and they took a precaution. That'd be lovely. And I'd love to see him out there probably getting sin binned next week. But yeah, like I would, it's more likely that there's a strain there and it's a problem and he's not playing, unfortunately.
Yeah, righto. That's a good update, mate. We'll move on to the Bunnies v the Knights here. Interesting injury out of this one for Pearce Paul. Fairly decent shin laceration there. It looks like he came off second best to a shark, but he might have actually just come off second best to a football stud here. Brien, your eagle eyes have probably identified where this happened in game, actually, which is quite amazing. And there might be a bit of context to this that we can enlighten people about.
Yeah, mate. We kind of came to this conclusion together in that we were kind of jumping backwards and forwards before we came on to the pod here, just with a bit of information. I sent you the video of what I thought the mechanism was, and I think it's about 11 minutes and 40. If anybody wants to check, it's about 11 minutes and 40 seconds before halftime in the first half. He goes down in a tackle and his shin comes down on Dylan Lucas's studs. Like he's on top of Dylan Lucas and comes down on the studs. And then about 20 seconds later, and he isn't involved in any tackles between that tackle and when this footage 20 seconds later shows blood on his shin. So I'm assuming that's when it was, and it does make sense to look at. The interesting thing about this, and this is going very left field, but this is what we do on this show, is that during the week I noticed big fans of Zeus, Max King, father of Hercules, on this show. And Max King posted during the week he got like a boot rejuvenation where there's a company that effectively drills into plastic studs or the moldable studs and screws in metal studs, and they don't do it through the whole boot. They only do it in certain spots, and I don't know whether there's a science behind that, whether it's supposed to be for whatever it is. But I've got the screenshot, and I might post it at some point. But effectively, Max King posted this photo of his boot, and it had a whole bunch of gold studs. It probably had, maybe 4 or 5 still plastic studs, and then probably 5 or 6 gold studs, which were the metal ones. And I saw that at the time. I was like, oh, that's interesting. As we were watching this clip of Pearce Paul come down on Dylan Lucas, he had a very, very similar outlook on his studs as you saw them. There were a few silver ones and then a few plastic ones. So my suspicion potentially is that Pearce Paul has come down on one of those metal studs just at the wrong angle, the wrong speed, and it's sliced straight down. And look, everybody's been asking for the photo. Like the photo's floating around there. I do want to explain why I haven't posted it. The main reason being I've posted stuff like this at times on my page, and I get like a strike or something. Like I get a message from Facebook or Instagram or whatever being like, you can't post gruesome shit effectively. So that's why I've stayed away from it, just to explain, like I actually find it really interesting, and I'm sure heaps of people would as well, but I don't I don't want to do it at the detriment of my Facebook/Instagram. Well, not Facebook really, but mainly Instagram pages. So if there's any social media gurus, we've got our man Edwin at the Social Sandwich who helps us out. But if there's anybody out there who knows how to avoid those kind of things coming in when you post gruesome stuff, let me know, because fantastic. But yeah, it doesn't seem to like gruesome stuff, which is why I haven't put it up there. But when I say that it is like a shark attack, it looks really, really gruesome. It's like someone's taken a scalpel and just run it down his shin and it's just split right open. It's not nice. The thing sort of moving forward for him is that area of the shin is really thin skin and really taut skin, or lots of tension on that skin. So it's tough to get healing there. It's tough to stitch it up because you're stitching up. It's almost like stitching up like a drum skin, like it's so taut over that drum. It's hard to bring it back together. So I'd be very surprised if he plays next week. We've seen guys come back at around at the 2 to 3 week mark. In the past, we were talking on Patreon in the group chat earlier about Corey Parker. I think it was Matt Geyer had one as well. We've had a few shin lacerations, and the return to play is usually in that 2 to 4 week range. So very, very rarely does the player come back the following week, just because the risk A of infection, but B of opening it back up again. So yeah, I'd say he's a chance for round 27. But yeah, I'd definitely be surprised if he plays next week. James, you are a big fan of the conspiracy tinfoil hattery. I don't want to ruin a company's reputation, because I'm sure they still do good work, but this may be down to some rogue metal studs that were drilled into Dylan Lucas's shoes.
Yeah, look, tinfoil hat on with this one, Brien. Could it be possible? It may well be. It certainly looked like that with the stud conversions. They look like the standard screw-in setup where you got 4 at the top of the foot and then 2 at the heel. So it kind of looks like when they do like these conversions on the molded, that they keep most of the molded studs in, but they have the 4 and 2 alignment there. I guess for people playing at home, it's a bit hard to describe just verbally here, I guess. But where Pearce Paul landed was actually on those 2 heel, sort of studs at the back there. And if they are metal, which was what they look like, because like you said about Dylan Lucas's studs, they look like a different color to the other setup. So it may not be a complete guess that he's had that conversion there, and that might have been the reason why. I don't know. Conspiracy hat on here, Brien. Do they still check the studs before each game? Do they make you line up in a row, run their hands over your studs? I don't know if anyone thinks back to when they played junior footy, but we used to get hounded because most of the, back to when we played back in the day, there wasn't that many molded setups. It was really a lot of screw-in studs was really the more common one of them all. And, you had the 16s or the 18s were massive and you used to be scared about leaning on those things because they were massive studs. They could do some real damage. So yeah, I can remember distinctly getting the ref run their hands over the top of them and be like, "Oh, yours are too sharp. Take those boots off." Blah blah blah. I wonder if they still do that at NRL level, Brian. I'd love to get a little look around in the game, in the sheds pre-game, get the nails out, just say, okay, who's got long fingernails here? Who's got molded studs? Who's got screw-in studs? That would be really cool to see. On Pearce Paul though, mate, I'm on a bit of a heater here, but the one thing I do have a little bit of concern about, I guess, from an acute medical perspective is if he's got a difficult closure there, because the size of his laceration is so big, whether he needs a vac dressing to help that out. So he might need time in hospital. And obviously, if you have delayed womb closure, or they sometimes call it delayed primary closure, that does put you at higher risk of infection. And obviously, if you're trying to get back on the footy field, that is going to delay things as well. So that'll be one to watch, whether he has a delay in the ability to close it, or sometimes when you get swelling secondary to trauma, you can get a compartment syndrome type thing as well, which is a serious acute medical issue, which again they do normally fascial release for. So he's already had a big open wound there, but you're just hoping that it doesn't get complicated, and it can heal up in due course there. My brain goes to Jarrell Yeo with all those complications from a wound that's open, delayed closure, all the sequelae that happens from that. So you're just hopeful for Pearce Paul that he doesn't get infection there. They can close it up pretty quickly, and he's not at risk of that breaking down with secondary swelling, I think is probably the main thing. Any other add-ons there for Pearce Paul, Brien, just before we move forward through the games? I think I've sort of just gone on a bit of a tangent there.
Mate, you've nailed it. I completely agree on all the medical stuff as well. I think that's the biggest concerns: the infection, number one, and then the closure being so difficult, number two.
Titans versus Roosters was next. So Brandon Smith was ruled out pre-game with a calf injury, and then Joseph Ali'i looks like sort of a neck or shoulder type injury, Brian, there. He was pretty crook getting off the field there. So you're hopeful for not a brachial plexus concern out of this one?
Yeah, I think once again, I think a lot of people have PTSD from a few brachial plexus issues we've had this year. And your Tom Flegler, Rocco Berry was the other one as well. Look, I find this one quite interesting because I spoke down our value earlier in the show. So I'll speak up our value for this one because I was driving home from the Gold Coast when this game was happening and when this injury happened. And I was listening to the radio, and it was, and I can understand why, completely understand why, in terms of they were announcing it as a dislocated shoulder. They were like, yep, he's dislocated his shoulder. He's got the arm in the jersey sling, looks like a dislocated shoulder, season threatening, all that kind of stuff. Not to, I had heard, because I'd come home in the second half, so I don't want to act like I'm some Nostradamus, because I did hear the report out of halftime that they, it was better than expected. It's looking quite good, and he could even return that day. But going back to the mechanism, if I was there watching that live, and I'm sure you were probably similar watching it live too, you would, I guess, physio or anybody with knowledge around that kind of stuff would have picked it as a burner, like straight off the bat, and would have quelled any like shoulder dislocation, season over, immediately kind of concerns. Because I came back, I hopped out of the car after, an hour drive, and my phone was just full of Roosters fans, rugby fans, mate. I've never received so many messages from Union fans because,
point. Because
mate, they were freaking out. I had heaps. I had like rugby podcasts and all these people sort of being like, what's going on? Like, this is their guy. But yeah, it was super obvious from the mechanism. So watching the mechanism back, he doesn't have any real force on his left shoulder. His head gets knocked so that his left ear goes towards his left shoulder. What that does is it pinches the nerves as they run out of the neck, through the shoulder, and down into the left arm. So you get like numbness, severe tingling, pins and needles, and pain and weakness down that left-hand side. So it's like hitting your funny bone, but up in your neck and your shoulder. It's quite significant. Trent Robinson said post-game that he was improving as the second half went on. He didn't improve enough to return to the game, but he was still improving continuously as the game went on. A bit like if you get hit in the funny bone, it just continues to get better. Now, there is a small risk that he has bulged a disc in his neck potentially, and so that would bring extra complications. As we saw someone like Stephen Crichton, he only missed a week with a bulging disc in his neck causing pain down to his arm. So it's not, the be all and end all and worst case scenario. And we've just seen so few end up in anything significant. So by and large, the numbers and the data are very much in Suaalii's favour here, that he will be back next week with minimal concerns moving forward, because it's just a really bad pinch of those nerves.
Yeah, good summary there, mate. Like, it's going to be interesting to watch because the Roosters, again, don't have a huge amount of depth here. I guess Billy Smith's sort of come back through Cup, hasn't he, with the ankle? And then I guess Mark Nwangdawase has sort of had a game in Cup, I think, last week as well. So, the Roosters sort of need him come finals time. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And I guess the acute concerns there are pretty real. So one to watch for sure.
Funny, actually, just quickly, Billy Smith
Hmm.
named to return in New South Wales Cup and didn't play. So poor old Billy Smith, the saga of Billy Smith and injuries continues.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they've got Junior Ponga there as well. So potentially he's been out with a PCL. So potentially he's around. But yeah, look, I think by and large he should be fine. And Brandon Smith with the calf, it was just a minor strain. Mention that.
Yeah, good point. And the Roosters do have, I think they get the Raiders into the Bunnies for the last round there. So, I don't know what that'll look like on the resting front there for the Roosters, but they only had the bye in round 24, didn't they? So they may not rest a huge amount. I don't think they're going to rest for the final round of the season. I think they're going to want to pull the South Sydney Rabbitohs pants down if they possibly can get one over the neighbouring rivals there. So I don't think they'll rest in the final round, but maybe this one might be one to watch for those playing along at home. Dragons v Sharks will move forward to Brien. So Ronaldo Mulitalo was ruled out pre-game with a knee injury. That's a stinker for SuperCoach enthusiasts for the last game around for him to get ruled out late. Do we know much about his injury prognosis?
Mate, they said he just aggravated an ongoing knee injury. Once again, MCL sprain. So, these MCLs,
Of course.
they're getting up there. So, it would be rare for it to be just like an aggravation and only need a week. I just think they've said he's aggravated an ongoing knee injury. If like an injury on top of an injury, you're usually going to need a couple of weeks to kind of get over that. So yeah, this is a bit of a strange one. I don't, I'm a bit of guesswork here in terms of I'm not sure. They haven't clarified whether it's an actual re-injury or he's just, maybe flared up some swelling or something like that. But it would be rare for it to just be a swelling flare up. Usually it'd be because there's a re-injury there. So yeah, if you're a Mulitalo owner, I'd be a little bit nervous heading into next week.
Yeah, very nervous. We're just going to wrap the NRLW while we're going here, Brian. So I'm just going to list some names here. So Maria Paseka and Mackenzie Wheel were concussions out of this round. Jayme Fressard was an ankle injury there from the Roosters. You would have seen that maybe in person there, Brian. And then Cheyelle Robins Reti was a shoulder or neck concern in this round as well. Anything you want to talk about in more detail from the NRLW just been?
Yeah, Fressard would be the only one. Robins Reti would look like a crusher kind of thing. So once again, probably a bit similar to Suoli'i, just some nerve stuff. Fressard happened, right in front of me because the biff happened right in front of me, and then she got twisted right in front of me as well, and I thought it was going to go off again. Look, I haven't come back and seen the replay to have a look, but at the ground it looked like that twist and potentially he's just tweaked up like a potentially like a minor syndesmosis sprain or something like that. I've never seen a high grade syndesmosis injury from something like that, so hopefully nothing too nasty. But Fressard was, she was on a mission, a woman on a mission this afternoon. She was ready to fire up into anyone. So maybe potentially it just all got a bit fired up and, a bit too much. But hopefully it's nothing too nasty for her.
Well, Brian, I hope the red mist from the Gold Coast wasn't contagious. Otherwise, you'll be in rage mode for like the next week upcoming because there was red mist everywhere on the footy field today. But like I said before, we love to see that. I'm all about it. That's what rugby league was built on, and long may it stay. That's the wrap of the injuries for this round, Brian. So we're going to go straight into the Patreon questions now. So patreon.com/NRL Physio. Let's get stuck into the questions. First one's a bit of a gossipy one, Brian. So there's rumours floating about Nathan Cleary coming back early. Do you think this is possible? Sounds all like a bit of a G up to me. What are your sentiments on it?
Oh, like the question is, do you think it's possible? It's possible. Like if the grand final was in 2 weeks, I think he'd play. Because it's like once again risk versus reward, right? You play and then you play Brad Schneider or someone off the bench as cover. But the risk versus reward, there just isn't much point to playing him in round 27. I know they're in third, and like you could argue that they want to try and get back up to second, but I just don't see. Do not see the benefit in bringing him back for a round 27 game when at the end of the day, I think the Panthers would back themselves to beat anyone, anywhere. I don't think having a home finals game in that first week is that important to the Panthers. I think having Cleary at a really, really good spot. Ivan Cleary was quoted today. I think it was one of the papers saying that they're aiming for finals week 1. I think that's pretty stock standard. So I'm not sure where the rumors have come from. Maybe, SuperCoach people just trying to stir some things up. But I just don't see it happening at this point in time. What about you, mate?
No, I can't see it happening either. I don't think you'll see Nathan Cleary before finals week 1 at best. It may even be finals week 2, depending on how he tracks through his rehab. It gets to, I think if it gets to must win for Penrith, I still think they'll back themselves in to get into, the grand final, maybe win it all with a must win sort of scenario on the cards there. So I don't think him coming back week 1 is necessarily a given either. I think you just got to give him as long as he possibly needs. And if he's firing to the best of his ability, that gives you the best chance to take it all out. You saw what happened last year. Nathan Cleary can turn it on, and he doesn't have to turn on for long, and your team can be in trouble. Sorry, I'll move past my trauma from that final last year, Brian. Question number 2 is about Nicho Hynes. There's word of him returning to full training this week. Do you think he plays potentially the week coming? And if he does, would you trade him in? What would your plans be?
Mate, I was just checking the draw. So Sharkies have got the Warriors next week, and then they have the Seagulls and away in round 27. Look, so we'll talk injury first. He'll be 7 weeks post-injury, I think Monday of next week. Quick for a syndesmosis plus tibia fracture. We'd always, and I think we said on the podcast last week that we had him pegged as round 27 at the earliest. finals week 1. This falls in. It absolutely was the situation I was talking about when I'm like, yeah, it's really hard to provide as much value as we usually do at this time of year, because I do they potentially it's a top 4 spot on the line, I guess. But once again, I think the Sharkies are playing pretty well without him at this point in time. They had a good win tonight. Was it tonight? No. They had a good win
Savo,
tonight. Yeah, Savo without him. They're playing the Wars at home. I think that's a very winnable game for them. I just, once again, I don't see a heap of benefit unless he's absolutely banging the door down. I think I said in Patreon this week, I've got him at about 70%, 30%, 70% for round 27, 30% for round 26. It's kind of where my gut sits at the moment. That's up from like 100% round 27 or later. I didn't think they'd bring him back at round 26 at all this time last week. So it's changed a little bit, but yeah, I'd be surprised. But once again, that's this time of year. This time of year, it's all different. Would I trade him in? Oh, man, I'd probably prefer Sammy Walker as a bit of a hot take. And we'll talk about in a second. They're going to talk about Roosters and the chance of resting. I think you hinted on it a little bit earlier, but I just think the Roosters have got 2 really good matchups that I'd just probably prefer him fully fit and healthy firing as opposed to Nico coming off, a pretty significant injury like that. Playing, the Wales at home, good matchup, but then Manly away. Not that Manly are the, defensive juggernaut by any means. But, I'd probably prefer Sam Walker if you don't have him. What about you, mate? Where would you sit on Nico, sort of buying him if he's named for round 26?
So I wouldn't buy him round 26. I would be more keen on round 27. I just can't see a world where he makes round 26, Brien. The Warriors have this week and then they bye next week. So they're effectively season done after this week. So my thinking would be, I don't know if you're going to see a Warriors team that's going to come out and rip and tear. I think there might be, Bali trips getting booked in, trips to the Cook Islands, trips to Samoa, like beautiful places in the Pacific that you can get to with a plane trip from Auckland. I don't think you're necessarily going to see the best out of the Warriors this week, personally, especially after, the emotional come down of what they would have put into last week for Sean Johnson's final game. I think it could build up into a fizzer for the Warriors this week with the Sharks getting it done. So I don't think you need to risk Nico this week. I would definitely look at him round 27 because if it's a must-win game against Manly, Manly just got put on them by the West Tigers. So, they're not exactly a defensive powerhouse either. Manly, obviously much better at home. We know that. At Brookie, they're a different beast. But I'd still be looking at Nico maybe around 27 if you really need to put in difference. But I do like Sam Walker better. I also like Matt Burton probably better than Walker. I think Brien as well. So I think in terms of who the Bulldogs have, they get Manly this week at home. So they're Bulldogs at home. And then they get the Cowboys in the final round. So, they're not, Cowboys aren't stout defensively by any stretch of the imagination. Manly isn't the worst matchup. I don't think I'd really want to run into Manly coming off the back of a loss to the West Tigers because I think they might get up for it a bit more. But then again, you do have Anthony Seibold compounding that as well. So whether they get up for it or not, maybe they won't because if you don't back the coach in there, which a few of us don't on the Magic Sponge, you may not see them at their best necessarily. The Bulldogs are due for a bit of a stinker, I suppose. They're sort of everyone's like, oh, they'll drop a game soon. They'll drop a game soon, but by God, Brien, they've been pretty goddamn consistent since like round 3 or 4 this year, haven't they? And Matt Burton's leading the charge. He's got a high floor. I think Walker's the go, but I think Burton would be my second preference there. What do you think about Matty Burton as a bit of a take there for Manly into Cowboys?
Love it, mate. I'd prefer him as well. That's just a fully fit Matt Burton. Yeah, give me that over a Nico coming back 7. Even though syndesmosis injuries don't usually have massive performance implications, I'd still just rather go with guys who are killing it at the moment and fully fit and healthy.
Yep, very good, Brien. We'll move on to the next question. So this Patreon writes in, I have all of Joseph Willie, Mulitalo, and Sami in my draft team. Can I expect any of them for my grand final next week?
Yeah, Sami, I forgot to include him in the rundown. He got ruled out pre-game with some niggles, was what Des said, just resting. So I'm pretty confident in Sami. We've already said Suaalii. I'm pretty confident that he'll be right for next week, provided there's no disc bulge or anything in his neck. Mulitalo is the wild card. I really don't know with him. I am that is a real strange one to kind of have that aggravation in the MCL. So I'm very 50-50 on Mulitalo. Where would you sit on those three, mate?
Pretty much exactly the same. I don't think there'd be any other things I'd sort of progress more or less than that. Team list is going to be a bit of a nervous wait for this sort of patron there as it comes forward, especially in the lead up to a grand final. It'll be nervous times. Question number 4 next, Brian. So I guess broadly speaking, which key Roosters players do you think are your chance of resting leading into the finals? I think Bellamy's come out and said he's going to be resting next week. So he's obviously going to save the boys up for the Broncos in round 27, which, doesn't matter because Kevy's guaranteed we're getting in. So don't know what Bellamy's thinking about that. But you'd think Trent Robinson more likely to rest next week versus the Raiders and the Rabbitohs in round 27. I think I said earlier, the Roosters always love to get a win over the Bunnies. That's just how they operate. So maybe this week is where they'll choose to take the rest against Canberra. What do you reckon about that?
Mate, I like my hot take, and I'm going once again off this of it's very hard to read mentalities at this time of year, but I just don't see why the Roosters would rest anyone. Because as you said, they've just had the bye. They're relatively fit and healthy. Like they've had a few guys, and obviously JWH potentially looking at a suspension. But they're in second at the moment. That's big for them. I've said that Penrith, I don't think Penrith care who they play, where they play. And this is no slight on the Roosters, but I think the Roosters would really value playing the Panthers at home in week 1 rather than playing Panthers away in week 1. So I think the Roosters absolutely have to win the next 2 weeks. My gut says that they don't rest at all. That's what I would kind of feel. Now, yeah, I'm not basing that on any knowledge in behind the scenes or anything like that, but I just think, yeah, like I if I was Craig Bellamy, I would rest almost the entire Storm team this week, traveling to North Queensland on a short turnaround. Give them the rest, roll out your reserve grade guys, and then next week against the Bronx, that's a great touch up before finals. You're going to have a very motivated Bronx team. You can get your combos. You can have a good. So then you don't have that risk of we're going into the finals, underdone. We're up against a good Bronx team, and that kind of gives us our touch up. If I was Storm, I would absolutely rest everyone this week, play everyone next week. And if I was the Roosters, I would rest no one personally, unless there's anybody who's dealing that we don't know about, who's dealing with like some sort of niggling AC joint or rib or something like that. Maybe you give them a rest. But other than that, that's kind of where I stand on it. What would your thoughts be on those two teams?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Brian. I'm trying to make an argument for why you'd rest Roosters players there. I guess the only thing would be, do you rest him just to avoid injury altogether? But I don't know, you can't really play, like that long term, can you? Or short term even. You can't just be like, oh, we'll hold these guys out just in case. I don't know. I think you've got to sort of go into the finals with a little bit of momentum. I think you've got to be trying to hit your straps. The other thing, we had the Storm getting the Broncos in the last round. The Storm always destroy us at Suncorp, Brian. So for them, they're going to look at that final game as like, well, yeah, it's a great lead into the finals. And also just, they never lose there against the Broncos. They pump everyone at Suncorp. Like the Storm's record at Suncorp is absolutely outrageous. So I think it's a pretty good shout that the Storm will probably, take a bit of rest this week. You might see a few guys from Sunny Coast Falcons and the East Tigers sort of line up there through their feeders, and then look at having a full strength team round 27. For the Roosters, I don't know. I tend to agree with you, to be fair, but God, it must be tempting to rest a few guys versus the Bunnies. The Bunnies are going to have no one by round 27, so they could probably choose to rest the odd player there, but I think you'll see them very close to full strength. I think if they're going to rest anyone, it'll only be forwards potentially as well, because they're pretty deep there. I don't think you'll see them rest a lot of backs or outside backs. I think Dom Young might be one. If he's had multiple hamstrings, they might choose to give him a week. Maybe. So if you're a Dom Young owner, potentially. Maybe Angus Crichton, because they can slide in Siwa Wong. But again, that's purely speculative. I don't think, Teddy's a risk of getting a rest. I think Dom Young might be the only one that might be getting looks at there, Brian. He just looked a little bit short of full stride today in a chase against AKP. I think there was a I break that AKP, mate, and I was like, mate, Dom Young's this is going to be a hot foot race, and Dom Young didn't really even get out of third gear, and I was like, I don't know if he's a bit underdone or if he's just being a bit cautious with the Hemi. I don't know. That might be the only one there. Dom Young, any thoughts?
Well, that's my hot take was going to be I know there's been a lot of chat about this 100-meter race on grand final day. I think regardless, I don't reckon Dom Young runs it because after that today, I have a sneaking suspicion that he probably hasn't hit that top end speed since these hammies. And I think he's lacking a little bit of confidence there. So I think it's a great call. They might. The hardest thing with hammies, though, as we've spoken about with the likes of Turbo, is as much as it's important to have a rest, it's also you got to keep that load up, and especially that high end running load as well. So if he doesn't get that, like Turbo had some times, a couple of years ago where he had a quiet game. So he'd go back out after full time and do some sprints because he didn't sprint enough in the game. So it's kind of like, do you hold Dom Young out to kind of, reduce that risk of hamstring injury? You still got to get him running those, those high ends, which I'm sure they would do anyway. But yeah, it's just I guess something for listeners to comprehend is that it's not just complete rest. You still need that load for hammies.
Very good. On the hamstring topic still, Brian. So we're talking about Bradman Best here. Patron says, I'm just interested about info about Bradman Best and how he's tracking with his hamstring injury. The Knights are back in with a sniff for the top 8, but Greg Margie really needs him inside him to get a bit of better ball and get a few little looks there. What do you think about Bradman Best, where he's tracking? It's been a couple of weeks. I don't know how close he's going to be, though, mate. I haven't heard any news.
Yeah,
Where's Barry Toohey? We need Barry Toohey bad.
Mate,
Where is he?
This is a question for Barry's podcast. So get on to Barry. But this is his second partial tear of the year. So they're going to take it really, really slow with him. Adam O'Brien did say he's a chance, and they're going to have to run through some testing this week. I had him pegged for either like the week just gone or next week. So it's kind of that round 25, 26, potentially round 27. So I think like in isolation, he's a good chance. But yeah, being his second partial tear of the year, you just don't know how his rehab's going either. Like even though usually you'd think around this time, being his second one, it's potentially early rehab might have been slower. So he might be a little bit behind the 8 ball. So yeah, I'm a Mars owner as well. I would love him back next week, but I'm certainly not counting on it at this point in time. Are you kind of similar with that?
Yeah, completely the same, to be honest, Brian. I think I'd be surprised to see Bradman Best back before round 27. I think this round will probably tell the story there. They are in with a sniff, so I guess the congestion there is Broncos, Dolphins, Knights, Raiders all on 26 points with the Dragons on 28, but you're relying on the Dragons having a bed shit, which isn't a bad thing to rely on, because I guess the Dragons have been known to shit the bed a few times over their illustrious course. So it'll be interesting to watch and wait. But I didn't think Dill Lucas has done too bad out there in the centres. Bit of glue hands for fantasy purposes, but I think he's been pretty solid in real life.
Yeah, I agree.
Last one, Brian. So I guess this is about a draft question. So if you were a drafter who had the top 2 picks this year, you would have selected Nicho Hynes or Nathan Cleary most likely. And now when we need them the most, they're injured. So are there any other first-round draft picks that you think coming into next year you'll put lower on the list to draft, maybe round 1 players especially, due to injury? So injury considerations there. And then the second part of this question is, do you reckon that the later draft positions, so say pick 9 or pick 10 if you're in a snake format, they could be better than a top 2 pick to spread the risk and not have all your eggs in one basket?
Mate, I'm gonna answer part A, and then I want to throw to you part B, because I know you're gonna have some takes on that. You can always come back to part A as well. But in terms of, are there any top tier players you put lower on draft lists, or even like, am I less likely to buy them in classic too for people who are there? I just don't no, particularly those top end guys. Like if we're talking the top 5 picks, my top 5 next year is still Cleary, Nicho, Ponga, Turbo. And then Latrell, or somewhere in that range, especially Latrell with Wayne back. I think you said off air you could potentially argue Latrell as the most likely one, but he's got Wayne coming back, and Wayne just seems to sprinkle that magic dust, especially when he's first back. But yeah, I just don't know, who are you replacing them with? Are you replacing them with Reece Walsh, who, he's had a couple of concussion issues this year. He's had his broken hand, had his knee as well. He does get lit up at times. maybe Scott Drinkwater. Drinky's been pretty injury free, so maybe you could justify picking him a bit earlier. But I just think like Turbo is a perfect example where like he's missed 8 weeks this year or something, ridiculous with a hamstring injury again. But he's won you. If you've made your draft finals, he's won you your comp in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Like he has to have. I think I actually I lie on that because I played him in two draft prelims this week and I lost one and I won one. So I survived Tom Trbojevic in one league, which was a minor miracle. But he's gone large. So that's the reason you're picking those guys right up the tippity top is because they have that upside. Yeah, they have that risk as well. But there's like even your Drinky, I don't think Drinky has that 120 plus average, consistently. Whereas those guys all do. They could all do that week in and week out if they can stay on the field. So like I'm a massive guy in drafting for upside and just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle with those really top end guys. Munster is probably the only one for me where like coming off double hip surgeries, the groin issue, he's getting on a little bit. Is this the best we could have seen of Munster? And then I think we spoke about like late first round, if you've got an injury prone guy like a Munster or something like that there. But who are you going to throw in there? Because like if you went to the start of this year and you said, look, I don't want to take a risk with any injury prone guys. I want to go with someone safe. So I'm going to go Tino Fa'amausili, or I'm going to go Payne Haas. And it's like, yeah, like out of that turnout this year. So I don't look at many players in the comp up that top end of draft lists and go, they are safe. Maybe Angus Crichton, but yeah, even then, he could be an injury waiting to happen as well. So yeah, I just don't think there's many guys I would bring in there. So James, hit me with the part of, do you think the later draft positions 9 or 10 could be better than a top 2 pick? And then give me any of your top tier players that you change to.
So my take on, do you want to pick late rather than pick early, is that's the worst possible option you could ever entertain, because the drop off between the top 2 picks to pick 9 and pick 10 in NRL is just immense, especially positional value averages. You are just missing out on the absolute throbbers of the SuperCoach format. And that's why, for that reason, Brian, I hate people that use captains in draft leagues. Because if you get a top 2 pick, you are at an enormous advantage over everyone else in the comp. And it is the most shitty format when people go, oh yeah, captains is great. Yeah, it's great when I pick top 2. So if you want me to play captains, I'll pick top 2 and you guys can figure it out. Because if you pick up top 2 there, yeah, you might run into injury like Nico and Cleary have throughout the year. But your chances of winning week in and week out when they're playing is so much higher because of how high they average at a position where you can get a halfback who averages a stupid amount, like in towards 80, 85, because fullback is so deep. You can swing on the turn to 2 and 3 and get a fullback. So if you can get a halfback like Nico or Nathan, you are so much better positioned than anyone else. So I would say if you ever get a choice of your position in NRL, you always pick top 2. Do not overthink this. Just pick top 2. Do it next year. Nico and Nathan will still be top 2 next year. I think in terms of people that I bring into the top 10 next year.
Can I just interject for 2 seconds? Because I think a really important thing for drafters to remember, and exactly the point that you're making there, is like this year, pick top 2, and Cleary and Nico, yes, there's been injuries. But you talk about fullback being so deep. Mate, so many people who picked Nico and Cleary top 2 went to round 2 and got Teddy or got Dylan Edwards. Yep. Like I got that in one league. That is money for jam, right? And I know that's picking, like you could have got Gutho, which didn't end up so well, right? But yeah, I just think top 2 is so much better, so much better. I actually I'm coming around to, particularly if for whatever dumb reason you do want to play captains, is doing the is it Banzai or Bonsai draft thing where the 3rd round is reversed.
Oh, 3rd round reversal. Okay.
Yeah. So I, as the person who picked top 2, I don't actually get the early pick in round 3. Round 3 is identical to round 2 to try and even it out a little bit. And I don't mind that. If you really want to play captains, I reckon that's the way to go. But I actually don't mind that in general, because I reckon those top 2 picks, like if you can go a Cleary or a Nico, and then the problem is all the guys from pick 3 to 7 or 8 are all picking gun fullbacks. So they don't need a fullback in round 2. So then you're looping around and you're getting a gun fullback in round 2. I reckon top 1 or 2 is by far exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So I think don't ever drop your position. If you get a choice, if you win, your horse race or however you choose to decide, pick 1 to 10, get top 2, get top 4 at least, or get 5th at worst. You don't want to be lower than 5. But top 2 is a far, far bigger advantage. The one I'm really keen on next year, Brien, in draft, I'm really interested to see how it shakes out for the Cows. But with Val moving on, I think Scotty Drinkwater, if he's goal kicking, he's going to have that turbo Ponga ceiling. So I think I'd nearly slot him in at 5. He's obviously not going to play Origin as well. The Cowboys look like they're going to have an okay squad. I just wonder if Drinkwater might be a lock for top 5 or 6. He's been really good this year. And if you put a goal kicking boot on him, his average is going to go up by 8 at least. So he could be really, really, really favourable from a super coach point of view for next year. So he's one that I'm going to watch really closely. Jake Clifford might get the 7 position there, so he may goal kick. But Scotty Drinkwater is one I am pretty set on, I must say, early doors.
Yeah, I like that. The only thing I would say is potentially Jake Clifford might goal kick, which would be
it'll be touch and go.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it'll definitely be close. Now, Supercoach Corner, let's get into it, mate. This has got to be the closest we've ever gone. I've good bloked you by 1 point this week. Hit me with your score. And if you had any trade plans, I've got one who I think is not a bad trade in. If you've got anyone you can think of, but yeah, it's a bit quiet around our Supercoach trade plans this time of year.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I'm 1-3-6-4, so 1 point behind you there, Brien, somehow. So I don't know how that worked out. I actually VC Loop Turbo, and a lot of people gave me shit about this, and I'll explain my thinking as to why I VC'd him rather than straight seed him. I just always am apprehensive on that, those early games. If he gets a HIA or if he gets a hamstring, then that's a bed shit of a week. Like, your week is completely cooked. So I was just like, well, I'll put the VC on him because my AE is going to be about 20 or 25 between like a Sarko or Casey McLean, and I can live with that. That's all good because I didn't have many other sort of options there. So I could have straight outed him, and it might have got me an extra, 20 or something points, but it wasn't really too much in the washout. I think I actually made more on the loop, to be fair. So, mate, big scoring week. I don't know if we'll even be mid-range here this week, Brien. There's so many big scores floating out there with highly rostered players. If I was going to point a difference, anyone for the weeks are coming, I would say the missionary sex position of Isaiah Yeo did me some pretty good value this week, nearly topping out at 100 there. So just goes to show there, Brien, sometimes missionary can bring you the goods, even when you think reverse cowgirl might be the play. Sometimes missionary is just the way to get it done. So he's obviously in there as an option in second row. If you're looking a little bit pottish, he's a little bit highly owned, but mate, Dan Gagai and Jesse Ramian keep pumping out scores, and they're less than 5% owned each. So they're the centre wings. If I had trades, I would look at bringing them in.
Mate, lights off, socks on, still gets the job done, my friend. That's all I'll say on Isaiah Yeo. So he's still killing it. I just checked, mate. So you can have a check on your app while I'm talking. I actually updated to 1386 as we were going. So have a check and see if you've got me. But yeah, I survived not having Tom Turbo, Captain Teddy, big scores from Harry Grant, Ponga, Angus Crichton finally paid off for me after my Max Plath to Crichton trade and KL Ero. My pod trade is Dan Tupou. I on my point of I don't think the Roosters are going to rest. I just think into the Raiders, into the Rabbits, and with Dom Young not looking 100% after today, I'd be all over Dan Tupou personally as a great point of difference for the next 2 weeks. What did you update to? And then hit me with your mixer stuff.
Let me have a look. Actually, I've gone down. I've gone 1352. So Kale Ero's dropped from 110 to 91. So I've lost
out. How did I go up?
A stack of points there. So yeah, not great for me. So what was that? 1352. Yeah, sorry, I've
Oh,
I've
Teddy.
overstated
Teddy
that,
went up
but
to Teddy went up to 130. He must have. So he's gone up.
okay,
Yeah,
righto.
right.
Well, mate, Euro's dropped heaps. He was at
Mm,
I think it was at
10.
110, and now he's at 91, so he's dropped 19. So anyway, that
Wow.
explains why I've dropped down there. So let's talk about the mixer then, Brian. I guess is what we're going to talk about next. So for the mixer, 396 for me. Left a heap on the table here. I think a lot of people probably did. I boosted Georgia Hale and Daly Cherry Evans. So I left heaps on there with Daly Cherry Evans. So my team was Harry Grant, Georgia Hale, Olivia Koenig, Daly Cherry Evans, Melly Hufanga, who I cannot pick the right week for her, Brian. Like, the Broncos scored 44 points this week, and Melly Hufanga put up like 27. And I was like, come on, Melly, just give me the 100-point week that she pumps out every now and then. Anyway, not to be. And then Kalen Ponga was my fullback there. So 396 was my score. Left a lot on the table there, as I think a lot of people did. Not a great week for you in the mixer, obviously, there, Brian. Tegan Berry, really big letdown. Who would have thought?
Mate, I reckon this is my worst
Killer.
mixer week ever. So I boosted DCE with you, 50 points. Tegan Berry at fullback for 14 points. Oh, and then, yeah, just a whole bunch of I think Damien Cook scored 50 odd or 40 odd. Keon scored 40 odd. It was just not a good week. So, looking forward to next week. My games to target: Roosters and Raiders, Panthers and Rabbits, and Bronx and Finns for the men's. And then women's got Knights versus Tigers in my crosshairs. So I think, there's a few there who could be tasty. And then the Bronx versus the Cows. Mate, the Bronx looking good. I was coming home today and on the radio they said, oh, Bronx are down at halftime. It's a bit of an upset. And then I come home, turn on my TV, and they won by 40-16 or something. So they're obviously starting to hit their straps as well. So I might get on the Hufanga train to try and pick a right week. I did just want to mention for the women's, Koenig played some middle minutes today with the Roosters. And I know I spoke about that in the preseason. It hadn't really eventuated. But if she starts doing that a little bit more often, or potentially even if she's named at lock, I'll be all over her like a rash. So, that's our moves this week, mate. That's a wrap. If you like the pod, give us a review, recommend to a friend, all of those things. If you want more info like this, patreon.com/NRL Physio, mate. It's the Magic Sponge Showdown this week. Bronx versus Finns. I look forward to talking to you next week after and talking about the wash up of that. I'm definitely a sorrowful Finns fan at the moment. I am not confident in their ability to do anything, but mainly they could be in first position at the moment. I still would not be confident because Kevy has guaranteed finals. So there's not much the Finns can do about it.
He said it. So let's manifest it together here, Broncos fans, and see the boys home at Suncorp on Saturday night. It's going to be a good game, actually, Brian. I think it's probably not going to be top shelf footy because everyone's missing a few, but I still think it's going to be a really close game. And they do turn on good games of footy, these two. So looking forward to it, mate. It's going to be good fun to catch up on Sunday night.
Yeah, no, it'll still be a very, very good week. As always, guys, enjoy your week and up the mighty Redcliffe Dolphins.